You are listening to the global network of podcasters dedicated to the pharmacy profession. Welcome to the Pharmacy Podcast Network.
Welcome to the SureCast, covering the SureCost Insights 2025 here in Nashville, Tennessee.
All right, welcome back, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the break. So glad that you came back. We have some exciting stuff happening right now. SureCast Live. This is a live edition of a podcast with Todd Eury from the Pharmacy Podcast Network. Goes by RX Podfather. Is that right, Todd? Did I get it? All right. He's been doing it for 16 years. It was actually the first pharmacy podcast in existence. So please welcome Todd Eury from the Pharmacy Podcast Network and co-host Calvin Hunsicker.
Hey, thank you so much for being part of this. This is a special event for me. Founder of the Pharmacy Podcast Network, released in March of 2009. You can still find the very first episode. It sounds like I was talking out of a tin can. It's on YouTube. It's embarrassing. Come a long way. 42 podcasts are a part of this network now, the world's largest platform for audio for the pharmacy profession, made up mostly of pharmacists about pediatrics and geriatrics and specialty pharmacy and specialty disease states. So my relationship with companies over the years has been transformational for my own career. And out of my 21 years in pharmacy, Pharmacy Podcast Network became my full-time position in 2019. And it's been a blessing. It's been a blessing to collect the mind share and the passion and the professionalism and how we're all moving this industry, this very complex industry, forward. And Calvin, I want to thank you so much for having me to be part of today's discussion about the emerging technologies and the future of pharmacy embracing AI. And I thank you for all being part of it too. We're going to ask for your feedback and participation. If you're listening on your favorite podcast platform, please share the SureCast with a fellow pharmacist, a fellow pharmacy professional. And if you can say SureCast fast 5 times in a row, you get a prize. You'll get a t-shirt. All right, I'm going to have a seat as well, and I'd like to also welcome to the stage people that are passionate. I always look for people that are passionate about what they're doing. I learn from you. I've been involved through my own interviews, 2,200 interviews over 16 years. And what a learning, I learned from the profession. I learned from people like you, Calvin. But I also learned from Marsha Millonig, who's president and CEO of the Catalyst Enterprises. Marsha, please join us on the stage. I also want to bring up Vice President of Pharmacy at AmPharm, Amy Cruse. All right. So this is interesting. Mostly I'm in my studio. We're usually twerksing. This Week in Pharmacy comes out every single Friday. It'll actually be out this Friday as well. And we dig into what's happening in our profession as quickly as we can and start to shape conversations that help us to make some decisions. And today, that's what we're doing here at the SureCast. We are interested in understanding the perspectives of these 3 amazing pharmacy professionals who have been working in our markets and understanding what this means for our future. Future. What a word. What an inflection point that we're in right now. The future's right now. I remember when I used to talk about predictive analytics 10 years ago and how it's happening. And then we started talking about AI, and now it's happening. And if you're not using tools like that, you're going to be left behind. And Calvin, I kind of want to open up to you first, and that is, what can you share with our people that are here today at SureCost Insights 2025, but also our listeners didn't get to make it here? What do you say to them when you found out that they're not implementing AI yet, or they're not using data as a map for their profession. Just share with us some of your thoughts.
Yeah, no, great question. And obviously, I think, as I spoke to earlier, I think the future is the implementation of AI. If you're not using it today, you certainly want to make sure you're looking at how you can incorporate that into your organization. I know at SureCost, we're looking at AI both internally for helping us develop and continue to develop our product, and also within engineering and within the company as a whole, how we can actually better serve you and our customers out in the marketplace. The other area is around the product itself. And we wanted to take a teaser, because obviously at the next roadmap piece we're going to talk about it and show you, you'll be the first to see our drug shortage insights. And so we wanted to come up with a way that we could implement AI in a positive, impactful way to you as pharmacy, and give you insights, which Jessica mentioned, the importance of giving you that transparency and visibility of the marketplace and what's happening there. We are not stopping there. We want to incorporate that in our purchasing and being able to help you make decisions at the time of purchase with Copilot, where it will be assisting you of, hey, this item you're ordering is potentially going to be short. Here's an opportunity. Here's where you could potentially get it. If you don't have that relationship with a vendor, showing you other vendors or showing you other opportunities that you can actually move product to if you need to. And beyond that, we're looking at, and Jessica spoke to this as well, looking at your agreements holistically. What is, from your agreement standpoint, what are the values you're getting? What are the values you're getting from those rebates? What are the values you get from the secondary market? And then how you piece that all together. And in the past, we've all looked at that retrospectively. We get that data, we're like trying to make decisions on that. We want to give you a forward-looking, here's the dynamics in pricing, here's the changes that are happening in pricing, here's when it's happening, here's the dynamics in product availability and the market changing, and how we can actually help provide you that insight to make better decisions, whether next time you're meeting with your wholesaler or with your agreements or your strategies as a whole, to maximize your margins within your pharmacy operation. So that's a big piece. Lastly is around inventory. And I feel that inventory is becoming a more important piece to your operation. I think pharmacies looked at inventory in the past more as an accounting principle, like I'm curious what my inventory is. You kind of use that as a way to gauge, is there shrinkage, what's my true cost of goods, blah blah blah. But it really, if you think of inventory as a way to be the genesis of your order, and I kind of spoke this a little bit earlier, where you have predictive knowledge of what your supply is, what you need in terms of utilization. And again, factoring in shortages, factoring in pricing, factoring in all those things, how do you maximize that inventory so you have that right drug at the right time for your patient, so you don't have any lapses in service to your patients. So those are areas that, if you're not implementing inventory, I do think inventory is an important piece for a pharmacy to look at. I know there's some discussions later today that we'll be talking about that specifically, but I do think that's an area that we've seen our customers really excel, both in terms of time savings, minimization of out of stocks, minimization of inventory, and maximization of having the right product at the right time. So
I appreciate that. AI makes a lot of people nervous because they don't know how to apply it. They don't know how to apply it to the data within those components: operations, staffing, shortages prevention, buying better, price analytics, profitability. But now I shift to the media aspect of it, and that is the truth be told. And we have a lot of discussions right now on LinkedIn with people inside pharmacy, people in health system, and people in public relations, where we're saying, as a sector of the entire healthcare ecosystem, how are we using AI responsibly? And how can we assure that truth and validity and authenticity is being pulled out of what we have through AI, but accelerating and making things easier and double checking? For example, I use AI to bring show notes that are accurate to what was being said, so I don't forget something, and a spell checker. I will admit it. I'm a horrible spell checker. And that's such a novel, the infant way of using it, but it was a start. 2 years later, since I've really been using it, I see so many things happening in tech that they're pulling data into an AI model, and if you know how to prompt the system that you're using, the massive amount of guidance and validity that can come of that. So I want to shift to that perspective of the user, and that is Amy Cruse, Vice President of Pharmacy at AmPharm. Amy, kind of describe to us your perception of artificial intelligence today and how that impacts your operations.
Well, I think I'd really like to build a little bit on what Calvin said about inventory management. So we've really been successful because of SureCost with managing our inventory, perpetual inventory. So it's kind of the forefront of, I think, what the future holds with AI. But it's allowed us to be more efficient. We have automated min-max levels. A high percentage of our orders are automatically done with auto replenishment. So I really think that aligns our purchasing with our census data. So we're already kind of using these more simple tools that I think in the future will really push us to do even more with AI. And I think SureCost as a vendor has really helped us on that cusp of, in really increasing that for our business.
Who here, by a show of hands, has implemented AI into your operations based on what Amy was sharing? Just to show me hands of your operations, your inventory. See, it's less people than I would have guessed. I saw maybe 8 hands go up. And what that tells you as people that are actually running the day-to-day operations of pharmacy operations is to embrace people that know how to leverage AI and learn from them and take it little bits by little bits. Like I just admitted, I used it as a spell checker 2 years ago, and now of course it's helping me to run scheduling, and it's helping me to make sure that we're tying our clients' messaging back to campaigns. And I'm thinking of different aspects of how to leverage and how to get more out of what you're doing day to day, and how can it help you empower your pharmacy technicians to take up more responsibility by making them comfortable with it. I do want to go to Marsha, because we talked a little bit about, before this event, Marsha and I have been talking a lot lately about validity and authenticity and the use of AI. Your perception, Marsha, you have documented the profession for 30-some years as a writer, as someone that is a reporter in so many of our industry magazines. Talk to us your perception about how AI is going to be implemented to help our pharmacy profession move forward.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting when you do an environmental scan out there, there's really 2 components to the whole AI question. I think here today we're probably focused more internally on how can we use it in our operations to drive profitability. And Amy just brought up a great example of that, and I have a few more. But surprisingly, I think you read a lot in the media about how retailers and consumers are using AI, and there's just been a huge study published, and I was stunned. I shouldn't be, because I'm probably one of these consumers, but almost half of all consumers now rely on AI as their primary source for shopping online. And it certainly declines with age, so the baby boomers, of which I'm part, are the lower of that spectrum, but almost 50% of them. And so the secondary source is search engines. So number 1 is AI, number 2 is search engines. But what's fascinating about it is, while they claim it helps them make a purchase decision and they rely on it, there's a big trust issue, as Todd says. And I don't know about all of you when you first start using AI, but I think that's one of the black boxes to me. You do a search and you get what sounds like a reasonable answer, but how do you know if it's accurate? And that's what consumers also say. So they're using it, it's helping them make buying decisions, but it's also creating more clicks. More clicks is more opportunity for you from an external point of view with your market. So don't forget to think about that in addition to operations. So I think, again, looking externally, what can you be doing with your external facing information to help AI drive a consumer purchase decision, and building trust and credibility with those results and being consistent is the #1 output of this study that we had. And I know we're going to get more into operations, so I'll leave it at that for now.
Yes, so the feedback and the comments, especially my favorite platform is LinkedIn, will AI take over our jobs? And it's more threatening to me as a podcaster, as someone in media, as someone who develops even graphics for clients and PowerPoint presentations. But then when I start looking at the pharmacist decisions, the safety of medication management, plugging it into Wolters Kluwer or plugging it into Medispan and starting to ask it questions about specific disease states, and let's marry that with the EHR data that we can get and start dialing into pharmacogenomics and looking how the treatment is going to trend for a specific patient. Take that data, times it by thousands of patients that have been on the same exact medication, and start predicting what their outcomes will be. It's scary, because it almost feels like it's going to be taken out of our control. But the truth of the matter is, as long as there's a PharmD around and they give license out by NABP, it's still the pharmacist's responsibility to keep that patient safe. So therefore, AI needs to be a steel sharpening tool, steel versus steel sharpening over and over and over again to make you a more efficient clinician, to make you more effective clinician in order to do more. Because we know right now, with everything happening in PBM reform, your day, your 8-hour day or your 10-hour day, you have to do more and more and more and get more out of your systems. And the leveraging of AI can definitely help you do that. I have a question for Calvin. You've been watching this, one of the OGs with the first, SureCost was the very first system that we wrote an API out of our pharmacy management system that I was working for at the time to SureCost, back in the Emerald technology days.
Oh, yeah.
And I want to know from your perspective, let's take AI out of the picture. And let's just talk about mapping, and let's talk about making better decisions. Where is SureCost at before the AI monster came to be in helping to keep patients safe based on data?
Yeah, great question. I think, one of the areas that we've seen is, pharmacy, as pharmacists, pharmacy technicians, we're kind of thrown into purchasing, and it's a necessity. We kind of have to do it to make sure there's inventory there to serve your patient. It's not what we're trained for. I mean, as pharmacists or even pharmacy technicians, you're not trained to really understand supply chain. You're not trained to understand how to maximize those turns of inventory. You're just there to try to make sure that you have that right product for the patient that when they come in to be served. So throwing that into the mix, and I mentioned this earlier, is pharmacy is to some degree manufacturing. You're taking a bulk product and you're fine lining that down to ultimately distribute to a patient, but it has to be right. You can't make a mistake. And you also want to have the time to actually work with your patients, to be able to consult with them, provide them feedback. David spoke to this earlier. Pharmacists have far more interaction with patients than physicians do. So we're kind of the front line and one of the most trusted professions in the marketplace. So being able to put what we hear out in the marketplace is to practice top of license. How do I practice the top of license? And the only way to do that is to free yourself up from the day-to-day burdens, because if you're tied to those, you don't have that ability to do. You're working on prior auths, or you're working on, like I said, trying to procure product. So one of the things we focus on, this is again before AI, is how to make that process simpler. And the other thing that we also focus on, a lot of the systems that were out there are very linear. It's kind of an NDC based, compare this NDC and sources and price, but you're not looking at the big picture, because we know the market's very fluid within the product group. Anything that's equivalent, wholesalers change those products, sourcing availability of those products. So how do I know where they are at? How do I know the prices of those things? So we wanted to be able to kind of look at that holistically, and that's one of the things that we focused on as a product to make sure that we are looking at the bigger picture, and we're continuing to look at that bigger picture to take that burden off the day-to-day operations so you don't have to do that.
So Amy, I think of automation, and I think of decision support tools, and I think of us improving safety. Talk to me about your operations right now in the realm of decision support and improving safety and communications, especially with patient care and patients.
Yeah, some of the workflows that we've, implemented at our pharmacy that really helps improve, just the ease of operations. Really, what we stress to our employees is that technology really has to support, your judgment. It doesn't really replace it. And so, our pressure for us is really to remove repetitive tasks so that pharmacists and techs can do use their expertise and use that to the patient's advantage. They can now focus on clinical outcomes, patient outcomes, and not just doing these manual repetitive tasks over and over.
So what's been a surprise to you when you're starting to leverage AI tools in your operations that's been like, oh, we gotta spread this, we gotta teach our technicians or teach our pharmacists to leverage something that you've invented or something that you've used that has made the operations more efficient?
Well, I think a big part of, technology is obviously going to remove some human error. So that to us is really the quality perspective, and really reducing our errors in the pharmacy is something that we're really passionate about. So to really get to that point, like you said, people are skeptical. Everyone's worried that this is going to replace their jobs. But I think we've really tried to emphasize kind of small wins with people, and that has really helped turn kind of the skepticism and maybe relief, and it helps them kind of adopt this growth and these new technologies that we're presenting to them.
I think an advantage to all of us is being able to come together once in a while. This is why this is so important to be here and start sharing some of the wins of what you've done in your setting versus what someone has done in a pure long-term care pharmacy versus a community pharmacy that's mixed, or a specialty pharmacy or something, and how AI is being leveraged and teaching our staff to use it better. Marsha, you and I have talked about pharmacy management systems on and off for years. You've been writing about these things in Computer Talk and Drug Topics, Pharmacy Times. Talk to me about your interpretation of how these pharmacy management systems and the tools that have already been in place are adopting AI to get more out of these systems so that our pharmacists can do more with less.
Yeah, I think Amy really touched on it. There tends to be 3 areas in my scan, at least of the last year and a half, where AI is coming into play outside of the inventory decision, which is so critical. I wish we had that where I practice. It's very frustrating. It's kind of a black hole. Maybe our corporate people are using it and I'm not aware of it. But it's really operations, finance, and productivity. The systems have been able to come in and use that machine learning, because really that's what AI is, right? I think that's part of the difficulty in getting your hands around it is, what is this artificial intelligence? And it's really machine learning, where you can process an enormous amount of data and get some trends out of it. And again, what Amy is saying, looking at routine tasks, a lot of long-term care facilities are starting to look at those patient orders on the front end and use predictive analytics to know when you're going to need something, which now ties into your system that helps me figure out how to order it. I think where, and some of the other things, Honeywell just did a study of retailers using this, and the great thing about it is it increased jobs, it didn't decrease jobs. It increased employee satisfaction, but a lot of that had to do with helping them understand, what is Copilot going to do for you? What is ChatGPT, et cetera? So what are those 8 or 9 common systems that are out there? Have the employees heard of it? Do they know what Google Gemini is? There are many. And how can it help you? Where there's still a pretty big black hole, and Amy touched on this, as did you, Todd, you're not replacing the pharmacist or the pharmacy technician's expertise, especially in patient care. There have been studies done using AI on the front end, for example, reviewing orders through EMR, EHR systems that are fairly accurate, not a problem. Being able to kick out some unusual outliers there. Where we've seen some real issues, doing some Google searches, if you will, or using AI engines for drug interactions as an example. There was a ChatGPT search that turned up 8 different drug interactions, and when you looked at the references, they didn't exist. So there's a huge hole in, with the studies that have shown when you're looking at using AI, especially in the drug interaction space, it is nothing close to the Walter Kluwers, et cetera. So there's a big black hole for consumers that are using that. And again, I think it just reinforces how can we use it to efficiently use operations, but then use our expertise to keep those black holes and plug those where we know they're coming.
There is nothing intelligent about artificial intelligence. And I wish that we would all come to terms with that, because AI is just a reflection of the data that we have fed it. So if we're worried about it replacing our jobs, you're just not using it correctly, or you're not tuning in. And for me, and like I said, it's more threatening to a media person or to a writer than it is to any of you that are working in a pharmacy operations. And I'm constantly refining how I'm using it to deliver better content to my beloved, I feel like a servant to the profession, my beloved profession. Technology is easy. Technology for me has always been easy, especially if I can read a manual or understand the components of it. It's the change management that's the hard part. Change is so hard. I'm still trying to start my 2025 New Year's resolution, and it's November, and staying consistent with change management in my own health, and that's difficult. But let's go back to something. I'm going to ask Amy about this, and that is building trust through data, reducing resistance, being able to help your teams adapt. Talk to us about how you're dealing with that internally.
Yeah, and I think like you said, technology, that's easy. We have vendors to help us. We have some of these tools, but really change management is what determines success for us. So like you said, we can have the best automation or the best AI, but if our team does not trust the data or doesn't understand it, it's not going to land with them. So I kind of said this before, technology has to is going to support their judgment, but not really replace what they're doing. So you have to be fully transparent with your staff why you're doing this. Like I said before, emphasize wins so that they can see the positive side to why we're doing this. Reassure them that removing all of these repetitive tasks kind of keeps, again, their expertise central. And on top of that, really, AI cannot replace compassion or human interaction. So I think people forget that. And that's part of our job, is interacting with our customers and our patients to provide the best outcomes for them. AI cannot do that. A person has to do those things.
Absolutely. So Calvin, you're supporting your users, you're teaching people to leverage technology, SureCost in and of itself, the design and training. Talk to us a little bit about that. The design, the technology, to me, once again, to many of us listening to the podcast, that's the easy part to understand, but it's the implementation. That's the design, the training, in order for it to make sense.
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, we have exceptional CS team to help our customers, and we continue to train those. We try to have folks that have experience in pharmacy and preferably even pharmacy experience with SureCost, which has been great. So having those, they actually can empathize, they're on the floor doing exactly what you're doing, and understand the process that you are going through. So it's easy to adapt SureCost and how SureCost fits your operations. Every operation does something different. I mean, even on the same pharmacy management platform, whether you're a QS1 framework, whoever, it's, everyone has their own interpretation of how they want their pharmacy to operate, which is great. And so with SureCost, we wanted to be pluggable where we can actually fit into your operation to the level that you need it to fit into. And again, if for some reason it isn't working, it's just not configured properly, because that is our goal, to be able to have it work seamlessly side by side with your operation and the goals that you're trying to achieve within your operation. I think the other thing is that when we design SureCost and continue to design SureCost, we want to provide actionable information. One of the things that I think is important, and this is part of adoption and change management, is you have data, but you have to do something with that data. Yeah. So if that's not actionable and we don't give you a path to actually take action on it, it makes it difficult. So we, as product and as designers of what we're doing, and we get feedback from you, is to find out how does this actually help you, and how does it make it more efficient for you to actually use our product, because that is a really important aspect, because you can't do change if it's difficult, and change in itself is hard. So to have it where it's actually easier to implement and easier to adopt is really important. So when we look at our product, we want to encompass the whole supply chain, really from start to finish, from the point of purchase to the point of receipt and verification of invoices and making sure that data is correct. And again, giving you more helpful data, especially around drug shortage and how that affects your supply over time. And then obviously we move into inventory, and your agreements as a whole are really critical for us to help you manage that process more efficiently.
Every transformation story has two sides: the technical, the technology, and the people behind it. And this brings me back to Marsha, because you've written about technology so much within your pieces, but you always remember the people behind it. You're always a storyteller that are talking about how those people how they overcame the challenges through transformation. Share with our listeners and on our teams some of your experiences in writing stories like that.
Yeah, I think, and I'm looking forward to talking to a number of you, especially those that raised your hand. And I'm curious how many of you this far into our program have decided when you leave here today, you're actually going to start exploring AI. There were 8 of you that were already using it, so how many of you are thinking you may test that water? Speaking of transformations, raise your hand. Okay, a lot more. That's wonderful. And I think it's that fear of the unknown. That's usually what I find when I talk to people and we start to do things. And I said the same thing to Todd. Why would I want to use AI? I'm a writer, and every time I do a search on a topic, now it just makes my job, just like that consumer, twice as much. I get a lot of information, but now I've got to figure out where it came from. How am I going to do that? That said, how many of you use Zoom for your businesses? A lot of people for meetings and stuff. The other day, we were on a call with this team, and I got on Zoom, and it immediately said, would you like to use our AI feature in order to take notes from our session? How many of you have experienced that? Yeah, I was shocked. I'm like, I didn't know I could do that. So, I think that's part of the transformation. Boy, that's an incredible time saver. I don't need to sit and take notes on that. I can just clean them up and send them out. So I think part of it is using it and those baby steps and finding things. One of the most inspirational stories I found in some of my retailers, we fight a lot of these discount cards because it costs us money, and yet we want to be responsive to our consumers, right? We want to make sure they can save money, try to drive some savings. And there was a great example of Caryville Pharmacy. They partnered with one of the pharmacy industry AI companies in order to look at their whole cash pricing strategy, and they fed that information into the AI engine, and they were able to produce an increase in their cash sales of 6%. They got rid of using discount cards, and 88% of the customers who were now cash paying saw savings greater than the discount card. At the same time, they increased profitability 96%. So that was a great transformational story to me, where you identify a problem, try to, have a little bit of faith with some of your colleagues. But I think learning from colleagues is another big thing, and I encourage every one of you to do that while you're here the next 2 days. That's what I'm going to do.
So this next question makes more sense as we've been sitting here talking, and I've been watching the audience raise your hand to the question that Marsha just asked. And I'm going to ask Calvin, what are you seeing that tells you and tells your team that pharmacy is ready or not ready for this next leap using AI?
Well, I mean, pharmacy, and I spoke to this earlier, I mean, pharmacy has to be ready. I mean, it's, unfortunately, the economic winds that are going against pharmacy right now it's critical to look for any opportunity that you can to be more efficient. And I talked about like prior authorization, and I know I just came from a conference, Becker's Health System Conference, and AI was a big topic. Everybody was concerned, like, is it going to take our jobs? Is it, how's this going to impact us? And the reality is, it is incredibly useful, to be able to use it for things that are repetitive, that take a lot of time, that, you don't have to do anymore. And it does free you up to do things that, are more, more we're designed as humans to be able to do. And again, ultimately interaction with our patients, interaction with our management team. How do we grow our company? Focus on forward-thinking things as opposed to, repetitive tasks. And I'm guilty of this. I think, we're all guilty. Like, it's comforting to do the same thing over and over again, right? Kind of walk in, we do this, like, this is what I do. But the reality of that is we need to change. We need to move forward so we can actually do new things, because we have to be more creative, especially with, like I said, the headwinds that pharmacy is facing, with reimbursements. So it is a necessity, really. And the timing is great because there are these tools out there to really lean into to take advantage of it. And those are going to continue to get better and better and better for your operations. And we're super excited to be able to help on the procurement side, and we're looking at revenue opportunities and optimization and other things down the road. Dickinson's going to talk about a roadmap and go through some of those things. But we're forward thinking as well, and how we can be a better partner to you, not just this year, but 5 years from now. So,
Amy, what sector, the sector that you're in, your viewpoint, been in it long enough to make this opinion, what are they missing? What part, what jump? We saw 8 hands raised of people that are using and implementing artificial intelligence into their operations. Is it the fear of change? What is it about not using it?
Yeah, I really do think it's the fear of change. I mean, and I feel like we're saying this over and over, but I really think this is the core. It's the fear of change, and people are so concerned that it's going to replace their jobs. And, just to piggyback on what Calvin said, our margins are being shrunk so much and continue. And if we don't find ways to be more efficient, our industry is already, barely surviving. And without being more efficient, we're never going to get there. So I think I feel repetitive, but automation does not replace people. It really helps us work smarter, safer, gives us more time to do the things that we need to do, and again, interact with our customers. And I think you just have to just really, really stress that with your teams when you go back with them. You've got to embrace this, or we're not going to survive, honestly.
All right, so we're looking ahead now. We've spent this time together, SureCost Insights, the first event of coming together, really dialing into analytics and data, and start planning what's the next phase, what's the integration to drive our intelligence, and using predictive modeling and benchmarking and smarter vendor negotiations. Calvin, what's the future look like as we leave and wrap up today's presentation on the future of AI in pharmacy?
Yeah, like I said, I think the future of AI in pharmacy is around finding tools that actually help your operations on the repetitive tasks, or the tasks that actually have the data, the big data, to be able to that you just don't have the time or resources to be able to look at. And it is a statistical model, really. I mean, especially the machine learning. It's you can apply those algorithms, but it's not to the depth that machine learning can do, and it looks for patterns that you wouldn't be able to pick up. So leveraging it there, again, from an operations standpoint, internally for your business, ways that you can actually save time, in terms of your own documentation, communication internally for your folks. We use it, like I said, in tools for note-taking, all different aspects. We're actually using it for documentation as well, trying to find, there's so many different levels of documentation, and then you have to normalize that. And essentially we're normalizing your data from a procurement standpoint, but operationally you have different procedures, operating procedures, and how do you make sure that there is the most optimal procedure for your folks to implement. And so I think leaning into that from a product standpoint, we are super excited because we have tons of data. And we'll share that with you coming up on drug shortages and how we're going to leverage that for you. But there's so much data in terms of looking forward to maximize your margin, maximize your relationships that you have with your vendors, because really that's what it comes down to. Looking at it more holistically, and how do you actually make sure you're aligned? How do you make sure? And you mentioned benchmarking. Benchmarking to peers like yourselves. Am I, having the right number of turns of inventory? What is my cost of goods? Things like that. How am I performing? And even for a large corporate organization where you have multiple pharmacies, how are those pharmacies performing amongst themselves? So those are things that we want to be able to raise to you as an operator to maximize, your effectiveness in your organization.
I like that. Marsha, so what does the future look like? What narratives are going to help us define the next era of pharmacy technology?
Well, I think it goes to what Calvin is saying. There's not going to be a choice to implement the use of AI to drive profitability. And Amy said it best. I mean, the pressure on margins, it's been that way in the 40 years I've been in business. It's not going to end. I think part of it is finding better margin business. I don't know how many of you are into doing some clinical services, point of care testing as an example, which is a cash-based business. It's a win for everybody, but you need to have the time. Doing immunizations hand down. I mean, for every GLP-1 we dispense at the pharmacy I practice at in a month, for a 1-month supply, I've got to do 9 immunizations to make up for that profit loss. Okay? That's a 1-month supply. That's why a lot of independents don't carry them, and I don't blame them. So, it's that constant, I think, search for what is my next best opportunity. And by automating these repetitive things, you got to focus on margin first. And that is what this conference is all about. I mean, number one, if you haven't done that, do that. But then look at future opportunities as well. Calvin brought up the fact that there may be a way, I think you were talking about using it in documentation. Fascinating enough, that is one of the best uses of AI in a physician model. They're using it to scribe. So next time you go to the doctor for your annual checkup, see if they're using it. Many clinics are, and what they're finding, it's creating consistency in the note-taking process, consistency in charting, consistency in ability to look at outcomes. And I think that's sort of the next horizon in pharmacy is let's get it in on the operations side, let's drive profitability, but in the future for some of these higher margin clinical services, how can we use it there to help drive even more money? And good. Everybody wins. The consumer, we do, everyone.
For you listening out there to the SureCast, do not, and for the crowd, please do not do nothing. Don't do nothing. Do something, even if it's a short step. There are so many vendors and partners who are passionate about this industry and this profession. If you don't want to reach out to necessarily one of your vendors, reach out to us, reach out to Marsha, reach out to me on the Pharmacy Podcast Network, and we will plug you in with somebody that's going to help you take those next steps and take AI into your operations and make it make sense. I want to thank Amy, I want to thank Calvin, I want to thank Marsha for being on the first SureCast. here on the Pharmacy Podcast Network. Thank you to our listeners. Thank you to my favorite providers, our pharmacists. And thank you to the audience listening. This has been so much fun talking with you. Thank you.
All right, folks, definitely AI is something that we got to start considering. It's friend, not foe, when used safely, but a tool and not a replacement, which is comforting to us humans. So thank you for the insight on that. Coming up next, we actually have a sneak peek into the product roadmap at SureCost. So what's next, why it matters. It's being led by Dickinson Marin, who is the Director of Product Management here at SureCost, and mentor and team lead. So Dickinson, why don't you come on up?
All right, good morning, everyone. My name is Dickinson Marin. I am the Director of Product Management here at SureCost, and I've had the privilege and the pleasure of serving in that capacity for the past 2 years, working under Calvin. And I'm going to get a chance to talk to you about our product roadmap, and then Calvin's going to have a sneak peek into something really, really, really amazing. Me being at SureCost is very personal for me. I took my family on vacation, and my son and I run into a store because he wanted a toy. And while we're in the store, my son collapsed onto the floor. And he starts convulsing. And I'm freaking out because for as long as I remember, he's been a healthy boy since the day he was born. And I was so scared. And I just yelled for someone to call 911, and I called my wife, who was in the parking lot. And I said, something's wrong, please run in here. And they called the ambulance, and they rushed us over to the hospital. And I'm just waiting to hear what's happening because he's behind closed doors in the emergency room, and they're working on him. And then finally they bring him back out and like, doctor, tell us what happened. And she's like, well, we don't know what happened. He had a seizure. And I said, okay, why? Has he ever had a seizure before? Has he hit his head? Maybe he's dehydrated. They run all the tests and everything comes back normal. And so we're like, what a freak accident. Wow, we dodged a bullet there. And then we went back home. And my son proceeds to have about 5 more seizures within a week's time. And they finally referred us to a neurologist, a specialist that put the nodes on his head and ran a sleep study. And we found out that our son had general epilepsy. Surges that were happening in his brain every 13 seconds, and his body was no longer able to control what was happening. And so the doctor told us, hey, he's going to have to be on medication until his body can eventually learn to handle all of these surges. And I said, oh man, okay, well, no problem. The prescribed medication was over $700 for every 30-day supply. And even with insurance, with our copay, it was gonna be $500 out of pocket. And I'm already thinking, oh my God, what are we going to do? I haven't had to deal with pharmaceuticals for a long time. First time I'm having to deal with pharmacy in any kind of way. And I remember going to the first pharmacy and them telling me that medication is so expensive and we don't get as much in reimbursement for it, so we won't be able to fill that here. And I remember thinking to myself, can they say that? I'm hearing some of you now say it to me, but at the time I was like, can they say no to carrying a medication? So I went to another pharmacy and tried to get the same thing, and they told me they didn't carry it there either because it was too expensive of a drug. So finally I got a pharmacy to do the fill for me. And I remember when it was time for the next refill, they told me it was on back order. And I said, okay, well, when do you expect to have that drug back in stock? And they said, it's going to be about 5 days before we can get it in. And I said, you have to be able to do something for me because without this medication, my son's going to have seizures. And I remember the pharmacist looking at me and saying, Mr. Marin, I am so sorry, but my hands are tied. And it was probably the most frantic 5 days of my life because he was having seizures and there was nothing we could do about it. The hospital told us you could bring him in, but there's nothing more that we could do other than give him more medication, and the drug is short. I'm grateful that eventually we were able to get his medication, in between calling the neurologist consistently and calling the pharmacy beforehand to place the orders early and working with the insurance company and everything else, that everything stabilized after a while. And I'm grateful for that experience because about 3 months later, I get a phone call from a colleague that said, hey, listen, I have this CEO that's looking for an experienced product manager. And I said, oh, what does the company do? He says, well, they do procurement and inventory management for independent pharmacies across the country. I said, I want to take that call. And I remember speaking to David and I remember speaking to Calvin, and I explained to them that this is more than just a job for me. This is personal. Because I understand now the importance of pharmacies across the country. I understand how important you are to patient care. And I took the job and I've been working in that capacity, and I'm really passionate about the work that I do because I know the impact that you have. Now, in the time that I've been able to speak to you, I've gone to conferences, I've been on phone calls, and boy, can I tell you, people do not understand how important independent pharmacies are to this country and to patients all across the world. Industry challenges that are in our sites, what we're going to be talking about, evolving pharmacy operations, and you already heard plenty about that, about the need for evolving as well as a preview into our roadmap. So what have I heard from you as we've spoken at conferences and on the phone calls and the emails that we exchange? We're talking about regulatory environment changes are killing us. The government's helping and they're not helping. The complexity of vendor agreements. I have this big contract of things I need to do in order to get to a number so I can get the best. And yeah, I signed it. I'm not sure exactly all of the ins and outs. I need someone to help me to explain that. Increased drug prices. Drug prices going up. Yay, me, I understood when that $500 bill came every single month and it went from $500 to $550 and from $550 to $600, those increased drug prices. Vendor compliance. I want to stay in the good graces of my primary vendor, and at the same time, I'm trying to maximize my savings within the pharmacy. Staffing shortages. So here, I didn't know that there was a thing in pharmacy where the number of people wanting to rush into the industry was going down and down every single year. I thought that people within the pharmacy just had bad attitudes. I didn't know that they were working without lunch and staying an extra 3-4 hours a day to try to finish all of the work that they had to do because of the complex strain on pharmacies. So I apologize to any pharmacist on behalf of all of the patients who don't understand what your day-to-day life is like. I better understand that now. Supply chain disruptions. Whether it's a natural disaster and or, like they were talking about earlier, a manufacturer deciding I no longer want to make this drug anymore, and or contamination, or the FDA stepping in and making a ruling. Shrinking margins. Trying your very hardest to, I'm not making as much money as I need to make to keep my operations going, and that number keeps going down and down, lower and lower, and then lower reimbursements from the insurance company. Making pharmacies have to choose between patient care and profitability for their pharmacies. What are those resulting challenges? They fall into 3 buckets where I'm concerned and when Calvin's concerned. It's managing staff. So you have these staffing shortages. You don't have a bunch of people running from college, running out of college saying, I'd like to be a pharmacist, sign me up for 6 days a week, 12 hours a day. I'd like to do that. And I want to stand the entire time too. I didn't know you guys stood for that long during the day. But even if people wanted to come in, it's a lack of domain knowledge. How do they actually help you with your day-to-day operations when they don't have any experience? And don't get me wrong, they teach you things in college, but real-life application, everyone needs to understand exactly how your pharmacy works, which options within the procurement system is the best option for you to maximize your profitability. And so Calvin built into our tool compliance management to try to help you remain compliant with your vendor and at the same time make it easy for your staff to know exactly what they're supposed to do. Managing costs and shrinking margins. I didn't know when I walked into a pharmacy the reason why that can of Pringles was $6. I thought I'm like, the pharmacists are so greedy. Look how much they're charging for a can of Pringles. They were trying to make up the losses. So when I heard the comment recently, when she just said I need to do 9 immunizations to make up for dispensing one of those drugs, now I get it. Okay, you know what? I'm gonna feel better about paying $5 for that can of Pringles now because I understand the reason why it's happening, trying to increase your margins. And that's the reason why we have purchase manager, procurement management built within SureCost to make it easier to know which drug is going to be the most profitable for your pharmacy. And then managing inventory. I didn't know this either, that pharmacists are trying to hedge their bets on how much inventory they need to keep on hand in order to serve their patients, but at the same time not have too much inventory on the shelves because you're just tying up your capital, money that you can't use for your operations, and then trying to make sure you don't have drugs that are expiring on the shelf. And it's the reason why Calvin built in inventory management within SureCost. Now, here are the quotes that I've heard from you that really stuck with me in our conversations. Number one, my purchasers made what they thought were the right decision to save money at the time, but it cost us more when we missed our rebate. And I remember the number on this one. We made a short-term $10,000 decision, but we missed out on a $40,000 rebate. The net gain for the pharmacy would have been $30,000. And it wasn't that necessarily the purchaser made a bad decision in the moment. They made what they thought was the best decision, but there wasn't this overall view of what would have been better for the pharmacy long term. I would have purchased more of drugs X had I known that supply levels were going to be impacted a week later. 88% more, or on the low end, 88% to 250% more for a drug alternative when it's in shortage versus when it's properly stocked. When I make a change in strategy, I would prefer to have it pushed down to each pharmacy so that the local decisions align with what we're trying to do. So I want you to imagine you have multiple locations, you come up with the formula with your team as to what the best items are to purchase, and then everyone at the local level are making different decisions than what the corporation has decided. And it would be great to know if the decision I'm about to make will make it more or less likely that I reach my goal. Am I on track to go where I want to go, or am I not going to hit those targets? So now, in terms of evolving pharmacy, we've spoken to a lot of you. We've gotten our survey results back. How do we change things within the pharmacy? You've heard it many times already. It's about being proactive as opposed to being reactive. It's defining your procurement goals for cost savings, compliance, and product alignment. It's no longer flying by the seat, right? I have to decide, here's the best outcome that I need for this year, and now how can I partner alongside SureCost to get me there? Automating enforcement of those goals so they're applied consistently across every single order. It means there are gonna be exceptions to the rule, but they're exceptions. They're not, here's what I think is the better thing to do, and then throws the entire pharmacy operation off. Monitoring supply chain risk with predictive data to anticipate shortages or disruptions. We can't eliminate the shortage. That was a great presentation earlier talking about all the things that go on in a shortage, how shortages happen. We can't stop the shortages from happening. However, we can help pharmacies to mitigate and be proactive in managing the shortages, and then continuously adapting workflows to keep pace with evolving industry challenges. We all have to do it. We're dealing with change every single day. It's having a solution provider that evolves alongside your pharmacy. What does the future of SureCost look like? There are a lot of things that we can do. And let me tell you, we're not short when it comes to ideas. Whenever I speak to pharmacists across the country, they're like, Dickinson, and what if you did? And what might you? And what can you? I have to take all of that information about what we can do and all that we want to do, and then decide what we should do, and eventually whittle that down to what we will do. The number one thing that we want to do, powered by AI, because we are adopting AI in a way that's going to make it easier to go through large sums of data and analyzing patterns, we want to do that with giving you actionable insights. It's not just giving you information. It's giving you information with recommendations about what you should do and helping tailor your workflows within our product to push your staff to do the very thing that they should do based on the information. Inventory-driven procurement, Calvin spoke about that. It's about knowing the right amount of inventory to have on staff so you're not overbuying and you're not underbuying, so then when Mr. Marin comes in looking for his epilepsy medication for his son, you don't have to say that my hands are tied. Configurable workflows. For us to be able to come alongside your pharmacy operations the way you work, so you don't have to keep changing how you work so much as we supplement the way that you want to work and your staff can accomplish all the things that you set out for them. Alerting and notifications. To tell you when things aren't happening the way you want them to, and or to make sure you know when you need to give approval for things. Tying certain workflows down so people can't take an action unless you've given them the permission to do so. Automated procurement and inventory levels. If we know what your usage is for a particular drug and we can forecast that out, we can set the system up to make sure automatically that the system is keeping those par levels. Now granted, we already have a lot of this stuff built in, but with the power of AI, looking at trending things over time, whenever there needs to be changes, the system can start making some decisions for you. Of course, waiting for your approval through configurability, but we can start keeping your inventory levels at the right place so you don't have money tied up on the shelves. And then putting in business intelligence, helping you to better understand how your pharmacy is doing in terms of operations, previous years, current year, and the year to come in terms of projections. So how does that translate into our roadmap? In our roadmap in Q1, we're helping you with the navigating the supply chain interruptions with a watch list. Calvin's going to give you a preview of this. Trending, trend tracking, predictive shortage risk scores, helping you to reduce your inventory that's on your shelves, helping you with unit transfers, helping you to elevate your cost of goods data or bringing the cost of goods data up so you can make better decisions, and then single sign-on. A lot of our pharmacies have asked for this. They want to be able to have people sign in one time and that be the single source of all of my authentication. I want it all go to a single place instead of having multiple usernames and passwords across multiple sites. And then infrared scanning support. Now in Q2, we're going to help you with implementing your own strategy. You come up with a strategy, you want that filtered down to the rest of your team, so everyone understands that here is the decision that my purchaser, my pharmacy manager wants me to make, and configuring the system to make sure that they can't make a decision outside of that unless it comes to you for approval. Historic catalog pricing. We want to try to keep track of the pricing of indices across time. Is that drug trending higher and or lower, and what should you do in response to those changes in pricing? And then later on in Q3 and Q4, really fully implementing the power of AI in Purchase Manager to do past performance evaluation, future recommendations based on your past and where it is that you're trying to go. And then adding in reimbursement data within our purchasing to do margin analysis. Again, just trying to surface as much of the data that we have behind the scenes, bringing it up to the surface to help you make better decisions. And then in Q4, additional SOC compliance work that we're going to be doing, regulatory compliance updates because they're constantly changing, enhanced controls and permissions, and then enhanced dashboards for reporting and analytics. Now, I've said a lot. Me and my team, we're going to be on the end of the hall here on the outside. We'd love to talk to you about our roadmap, and we'd love to hear about the additional challenges that you're going through, because your direct feedback is what shapes the roadmap that we pursue. And we'd love to continue having that conversation with you. But one of the most exciting things that we've been able to work on, and you've heard this as a running theme in this conference so far, is how we're going to help you to navigate drug shortages. And I have Calvin here to speak more to that. So ladies and gentlemen, can we welcome Calvin back up on the stage?
Okay, so you guys are the first to see this. Actually, I haven't used the clicker yet, so here we go. In terms of being able to see, we're going to demo live our drug shortage implementation using AI. Super excited about that. One of the things, we've been working on this for a long time. We started about a little over a year and a half ago, and we're thinking, okay, as a company, what can we do with our data, and how can we leverage AI in a safe, way that can provide real value to our customers? And we have a unique data set that really nobody in the industry has. We have supply data from all the suppliers, the big three as well as secondary vendors, so we know what inventory is out there. And we're monitoring those signals as customers are checking data, they're checking availability, we have that data. The other side we have is demand, so we understand the demand curve and understand what demand is being requested. So having those two sets of data, we can marry that together and implement AI to maximize and determine, is something going to be short? And if so, how long is it going to last? What is the confidence level? We kind of talked about this earlier, is, how can I trust this data? Well, our algorithm is looking at that data every day, and it's back testing that data, and then it's learning from that, and it gets better and better and better. And there's so much data, because obviously, this is everybody checking availability every day, so there's just so many data points. The more data points we have, the better we can actually predict that, and we have a higher confidence. The other thing we're doing is we're using FDA data. So, traditionally what's happened with drug shortages, everybody's kind of gone looking at their wholesaler, looking at FDA, looking at ASHP to find out, is this going to be short and how's it going to impact me? And it's a very manual process. So we wanted to automate that and be able to provide an interactive dashboard to show you these are the things that we see that apply to you, that apply to your patients, that potentially are going to be short, and then what are the best alternatives for me to order those products. So very excited to be able to show this to you today. We want to, obviously, this is our launch in terms of being able to get feedback. Our roadmap in terms of like implementation and having it out in production is somewhere in Q1, potentially early Q2. So our goal is to have this out to you, near term. And obviously, as we roll this out, we're going to be getting feedback. We're going to have a limited set of customers that can, be part of the beta testing. And we want to make sure that this is something that provides real value to you, and continue to evolve the product as we go. So the other analogy I kind of wanted to make, or metaphor here, is like, what we're doing is really like no different than you driving, right? You kind of have to know where you're at. There's a traffic jam. How do I get around the traffic jam? I need to go to that destination. Ultimately, in the supply chain side, you're really trying to do the same thing. I need this product at the end. What's my best path to get there? And so implementing AI, we're able to do that and navigate you to the best, least cost path to make sure that you're able to serve the patient. And they have that medication at the time, like Dickens said, before that patient comes in the door, you have that product on hand. So some of the things that, like I said, traditionally, and Jessica has spoken to this too, I mean, as an industry, drug shortages has cost the industry close to $1 billion. So it's significant. A big thing is time. A big thing is safety. Every time a drug is changed, it introduces a safety risk. And I know, Jessica, you spoke to this earlier. And there's statistics behind this. There's real data that show that either the formulation's changed, the dose has changed, and the chance of an error increases. And again, we're trying to be able to help you provide better service to your customers. Being able to see interactive trend lines and being able to see this, not only us recommending, but you can make that decision yourself too. You can see those trend lines, and again, we'll show you that example. Having watch list analytics to be able to kind of give you things that you want, that you care about, that you want to have at those watch lists, we'll be able to show you that as well. The predictive risk, what is my risk of this being short? And like I mentioned, how long is it going to be short? Because if it's a short period of time, you might not have to do anything. And Jessica mentioned like stockpiling product. It's almost like a traffic jam. If people overreact, it's going to start to slow down, and it's going to get aggressive and then stop. And then people start moving again. If everyone paced themselves, you really minimize the impact to the supply chain. So, the goal here is, and there's no way to stop drug shortages, right? But the goal is to be able to minimize those abrupt changes. And so having that data, for you to make decisions ahead of time helps you gauge that more appropriately, so you're not over-indexing one way or another. And that's our goal with the product. So with that, we'll go to a live demo here. So this is a dashboard. It shows you, all your products. The great thing is that right now, the initial launch here is really any drug shortage that our system sees is going to show. You can pin those items, so you can say, these are the things that I care about. Ultimately, we're going to integrate this with your data inside SureCost. So, that way it's data, it's your purchases, it's things that you care about. So you see those things that matter to you, and you still can actually pin, and there might be certain things you want to follow, but in the end, it's going to be interactive to your data set and what purchases that you make, and are they relevant or not. So in this example, you can see, trends. We're going to show you, at a quick glance, is the trend down, is the trend up for that product, or there's no trend. Obviously, these are on the screen are showing all down. It is NDC specific. And the reason is, and this is feedback from you, because of automation, because of payer, you do want to lock that NDC down, and you want to be, again, between your agreements, you want to maximize the pull-through for those products. However, you want to be aware if this is going to be short, and then what alternatives you have for doing that. We show you that status, if it's critical, warning, or there is really no worries. And then we also show you the product group as well. So these are all interchangeable products, and are they at risk? So we kind of escalate it up. Is this something that potentially impacts that whole product? In the future, we'll be looking at the equivalent, like the whole drug itself, the active ingredient. So, I'm looking at the various different dosages and the different forms of those products. So that way, if I have to navigate, I could potentially talk to the prescriber, recommend, hey, here's another alternative, still staying in the same class, so you're not changing it too much, But again, taking the least path of least resistance is really our objective here. So that way, we kind of move up the chain, same NDC, maybe you need a different vendor. Different NDC, what's the best option for me? And then ultimately, do I have other options within that product? And then lastly is therapeutic class. And then what's the risk? What other products are in that therapeutic class I can look at? So, and then we have the confidence score, and we also have source. Is this a SureCost source, or is it both, which we would include FDA, and we're going to be putting ASHP data in as well. So the more touch points we have, like I said, gives us a higher confidence, so we can actually be more confident in the results. And then lastly, it has the prediction resolution, so I can see how long this is going to last. So obviously, it's going to be a longer period of time. I need to do something about it, and need to make sure I have enough inventory to weather the storm. If it's a shorter time, like I said, you might have enough inventory, so you don't have to do anything but keep a watch of it. And this is the part where we're trying to minimize the overreaction and also the burden of bringing additional inventory in, or potentially jumping to different sources if not needed. So in the triamcinolone one, we'll click into that. And this is so this is the jar, the 454 grams. And these are you can pin vendors as well. So these are the vendors I care about. So I'm only seeing those vendor and that data. So this shows you the first half of the graph is showing you historically what has happened with the availability. So I can see that that's dropping down. And then the second half is what the prediction model is saying. Here's what we see from an availability standpoint. Is it going to be a problem or not a problem? So you can also include other vendors as well. So operationally, we have the big three here, but operationally, you may say, hey, I just want to see what's there for other vendors. And you can see they all pretty much follow the same pattern. They all had inventory, and then that inventory is continued to drop because of the demand on that particular NDC. And again, in this case, there's not much you could do except being aware of it. And you might lean to a vendor that has more inventory. The other option is to say, what other products could I move to? So if I scroll down, I can sort and look at this from best availability standpoint, and I can go down to the bottom to the last 450 here and view that result. And then it's going to show me that's certainly more stable. And if I include all vendors on this one, I can see that, there's plenty of inventory from certain vendors. Now, I might not have a relationship with that vendor, and so if I don't, this gives you an opportunity to actually build a relationship with that vendor. If it's a product that you need and you want to stay loyal to that NDC, we're giving you optionality here, and we're trying to give it to you in a point where you can actually make a decision ahead of time, because if it's reactive, you're not going to be able to call the vendor today and say, hey, I need this product tomorrow, because you don't have a relationship, right? So you have to credit apps, all the other stuff. So with this, you actually have advanced notice that this is a potential for being short. And then I have the option to potentially bring another vendor in if I need to secure that product, if there's adequate inventory in the supply chain. So another example, and I know we have a couple minutes left here, would be rifampin here. And so on the rifampin, Akron, as a manufacturer, withdrew from the market. This is actually a couple years ago, but because of the demand, you can see that inventories, continue to drop, and so there's some stability there. But again, you get that differential where you can actually see there is option for me to find other vendors that potentially have this product. So if you want to stay with that NDC because you have patience on it, you see there's a fair amount of stability with a couple of those vendors, but as a whole, the group is down. So there's still risk there. The risk just isn't as great as you would with some of the others. If all those numbers were pulling it down, we would actually have that as a critical. You can see this particular NDC is a warning. So we're letting you know there could be a potential just because of the weighting of the number of vendors that have low inventory versus the ones that have high. And again, you can sort, if you wanted to see other options there, you can do it by NADEC, by WAC, best availability. Ultimately, what we're going to be doing with this is integrating it with SureCost. So when you're ordering a product, we're going to say, hey, this NDC is forecasted to be short. And so that's the Copilot, SureCost Copilot. You've seen that mentioned before. So we're going to actually recommend, here are alternatives for you at the time of order. And if you're on perpetual inventory, we want to let you know even ahead of time because we know when you're going to need to order product. So we're giving you even further advanced notification to say, these are things that are going to be short. And so you can react and review what you want to do from an alternative standpoint and take action on it before it's a situation where you're out of stock. So again, very super excited about this. I also proud of our team. We said we wanted to get this done for the user conference. They worked very, very hard. So the product team, engineering team, QA team spent a lot of extra time and weekend working on this to get it right. We have had customer interaction and feedback from this at all points. Kelly, I give her a ton of credit. She led this product, this product as far as its development. So huge kudos to Kelly. And Will Davis is also our data scientist, so he's spent a ton of time and work on this as well. So just a shout out to those two folks. Very, very, very proud of the work that they've done. It has taken a team, but they were kind of the two that really spearheaded this project and really appreciate their efforts on this.